VLPSos here. This is a video lesson for Python programming. This is a project example called MyTool. I'm going to read the general objective and then run an example of a program that accomplishes all of the objectives. And when we see an example and experience what the program does, we'll go to the detailed objectives and reflect on how the program accomplished those objectives. What we want to do in the PyTool program or project is write a function that performs an established mathematical process and demonstrate its use within a program. So the program that I'm going to run is going to be a Pythagorean leg finder, not hypotenuse. It's going to find the measure of another leg given a leg and a hypotenuse. And we can see that the user is given some directions. To find the leg of a right triangle, you will need to enter a known leg and a hypotenuse. Enter the known leg. I'm going to test this program with a 3, 4, 5 triangle. I know that if a right triangle has legs of measure 3 and 4, the hypotenuse will be 5. So if I give the input as 3, and when entering the hypotenuse to be 5, I should expect, if it's going to work correctly, that it'll tell me the other leg is 4. And it does in a float form rounded to 3 decimal places of accuracy to show us that that calculation is as accurate as that. And the program ends with a thank you. This is a tool. I'm not going to show the code. That's up to you to code your own. But the code does have 2 functions that have been defined to run the program. One is just the function that does the calculation, and the other is the one that interacts with the user and makes use of the function that does the calculation. Let's read the objectives. The program must define at least one function that takes and returns float data. So the function that does the calculation is the one that's being talked about here. It took the measure of a leg and the measure of a hypotenuse. It performed the calculation, used the Pythagorean theorem in a few lines of code, and then it returned the answer. The function that did the calculation did not interact with the user, meaning it didn't print anything within it, and it didn't ask for input within that function. The function must accomplish a complex mathematical task or process. Students may choose from the following list or get approval from the instructor for their own idea. So law of sines, law of cosines, Pythagorean theorem, but not for finding the hypotenuse. It's a little bit too simplistic. The Pythagorean theorem for finding legs that cannot err. And we'll run my example and show what I mean by not being able to error. Continuing, the math function must not, excuse me, the math function must not use input or print. Getting input and reporting information to the user through using the print function must happen in the program, but outside of the code block of the function that's performing the mathematical task. Remember, input returns strings. You will need to convert the user input if math is going to be done with the values as numbers that the user supplies. The program must take user input, call the function, and produce a correct answer for the user. As in all programs, it must be user-friendly and coder-friendly. This includes, but is not limited to, informing the user how to use the math tool and how to interpret the result, which can be as simple as the words that were the prompts, the words in the prompts, and then the words that showed the user what the calculation meant in the context of the program. Let's run the program again and check that my Pythagorean theorem for finding legs cannot error. And error in the sense of being given information by the user that would not be possible to produce another leg. In a right triangle, the hypotenuse has to be the longest side of that triangle. The hypotenuse is opposite the largest angle, so it has to be the longest side. If I entered a leg of 10 and a hypotenuse that was shorter than that leg, then that means that the triangle cannot be a right triangle. We could still have a triangle with these different measures, but it can't be a right triangle, and the Pythagorean theorem wouldn't work. So the program reports to us the measures given cannot come from a right triangle. So the Pythagorean theorem, in the calculation, the Pythagorean theorem was attempted to be used, but there was something in the way that I coded that recognized that it would not produce a possible answer in this context and reported that to the user.